As part of a long answer to what you were alluding to, what's it like in the studio with Jimmy? I mean, I said it all in the books, but I can give you an example. Let's see. There's Olympic in 1967, Olympic Studios, 1967. I get the word from the studio manager. Oh, Eddie, do you want to do this session with this crazy guitar player, Jimi Hendrix? I said, who's Jimi Hendrix? Actually, I'd heard through the grapevine there's this new guitar player in town, and it was I knew about it. Of course, Hey Joe had come out, and everybody was, yeah, wow, this guy's great, blah, blah, blah. You know, he'd done recordings at Kingsway Studios, which was a studio in a basement, and a bank was above them, and Jimmy couldn't play loud beyond a certain hour, so they were looking for a new studio. Olympic had just opened, and I was one of the new engineers. And they always gave me the crazy stuff. Oh, Kramer, he does all the weird shit, so we'll give it to him, you know. So I get to do Jimi Hendrix. I'd worked with Chaz, because Chaz had been in the Animals. He was the bass player in the Animals, and he had checked the studio out, and in fact, he'd come in. I think he'd done a session there, and he kind of liked the studio. And on the first day of the first session, I remember there's a studio doors at the end. It's a room about this size, in fact. How big is this room? About 70 by 40? 60 by 40? About that? About the same size, almost a little higher ceiling. And I looked out with the control room, and I saw the double doors of the studio open, and there's this roadie, Jerry Stickles, with this Marshall stack on his back. Oi! Where do I put this load? He's staggering in the studio. Over there. Plop. And then the drums come in and stuff, and then Jimmy and Chaz sort of come on. Jimmy's like really shy, you know, and he's got his hat down like this. And hey, how you doing? Hardly spoke. And then we set up the amps and set up the drums and the bass. And from the moment that he played, it was like, oh my God. This is something really special. I mean, you know, people say, well, did you know it was really special? No, I didn't. I just knew that it was bloody loud, and it was quite impressive, and you know, I just had to be totally on top of it. You know, it was 4-track. You know, there was just half-inch 4-track machine, so we had a beautiful console. The thing that what happened was in England in the early 60s that we had great recording consoles. Great EQ and compression and all this stuff. Whereas in the States, you had 8 tracks, and we were going, shit, we want 8-track machines, but we couldn't get them. 8-track machines didn't come into England until like 1969, when the Beatles were like the first people to bring it in. So like we were struggling with 4-track, but yet we were able to go 4 to 4 to 4. We would record on 4, fill them up, mix that down to 2 tracks of another 4-track machine, fill those 2 tracks up, mix that down, go back to the first 4-track machine. So we would go 3 times. So those tapes you hear are a series of 4 to 4s. And you had to get your shit right then, because if you didn't, you'd screw yourself in the end. So it had to be right. So anyway, a day would be a short day because they didn't have much money. They would come in at 7 o'clock, and we'd be done by midnight. That would be it. They walk out of there with 2 masters. So, and you know, Jimmy would be if he wanted to do a vocal, we'd have to build him a little booth, a 3-sided booth facing away from the control room, because he didn't want anybody to see him when he was singing. He was very shy, and he'd pop his head out. Hey, how was that, man? Jimmy, it was great. Let's do another one. Oh, okay, yeah. I think I can better it. No shit. You know, I mean, anytime he sang or he played, it was like, oh, I wish I'd had many tracks in those days to keep all that stuff. Incidentally, before Chaz died, he told us about this wonderful cachet of tapes that he has, of stuff that nobody's ever heard. And I've heard it, and it's wonderful. There's some stuff that has never been released that's going to come out.
Yeah, I wanted to know about the new album. Like
About which one?
The Jimi Hendrix, tribute.
Oh, the
that
tribute
you did
album.
With,
Well, there's two. There's
with
the
the
classical
London,
one.
with the London Metropolitan
Oh, yeah.
Orchestra and all that. And how do you handle that?
Tough.
With,
It's a tough album. That trying to integrate the orchestra with the bands. I didn't want to do a Jimi Hendrix album with just an orchestra, because then it would have been like some of the other things, like the symphonic yes and all that. Ugh. I said, we've got to do it with the rhythm section. So the trick was to get it so that I had the best rhythm sections I could get my hands on, and find a great arranger and work with him and try and take Jimmy's songs and figure out what was he playing. Man, that was such a... for many years, I never realized... Is there too much bottom end coming out of the monitors? It sounds a little boomy to me. Just a tad. I mean, like in about 200 to 300 cycles, like dip it 2 dB. Thank you. He's laughing. He's laughing. I'll bet you it'll work. All right. So the thing is to be able to integrate the rhythm sections with the orchestras, because you got two really powerful things fighting each other. And I can't say that I satisfied everybody, but it was tough. Because the record company halfway through said, we got to make this thing more band-oriented. So all of a sudden it shifted from like being a semi-symphonic thing to being a more band thing. And I said, well, what about the orchestra that we paid like all this money for? Yeah, well, we can get it. So it was always a battle trying to get the two things to integrate. I think some of the time it worked, some of the time it's all right. But it was exciting. And everybody who played totally got into it. I mean, they really got into it. I mean, Buddy Miles was so cool, and and Doug Pinnick from King's X. I mean, there's some great performances. Paul Rodgers and Carlos Santana. I mean, it's Sting, the Sting track. Oh, talking about that Sting track. We're at Sting's house recording this stuff in his big living room with the fireplace going and the wolfhounds walking around, and all that shit. And the console, there's this SSL console across one wall, and the drums in the corner, and Sting's playing through this little bass amp. It's about that big. It's that Washburn semi-acoustic bass. I don't know if you know it. And John McLaughlin's playing through this stupid-ass thing. It's just like a rack. It's like a double rack. It's all digital stuff. And I said, for God's sake, let's make this thing sound warm. So we found 2 boogie amps, and we took the output of that and put it into 2 boogie amps and put a screen over it. And they jammed for 20 minutes before we actually did that take. The jam is sensational. That should be released. Anyway, yeah, sure. Yeah, right in my back pocket. I got it here. But that was a lot of fun recording that. So everybody was into the vibe. Oh man, doing a cool Hendrix song. All right, another question. Senor.
Over the years going into studios to schlep my gear, I've seen a variety of different philosophies on using monitors, and the one that always bugged me the most is guys are saying, I'm using these piece of shits because I want something to transfer to the car stereo instead of I want my music to stand up under the scrutiny of the world's best playback systems. I don't know where reality is on this. May I ask your philosophy?
2 schools of thought there. You're correct. There are situations where you would want to, however, utilize speakers that are this big. What I often do is I get a boombox, a known quantity boombox, not just anybody's, but a boombox that somebody is really familiar with, so you know that sound, like it's in your living room or it's in your kitchen or you schlep it around and you play CDs through it or tapes through it all the time, and all right, I got to boost the bass just a little bit, and I got to kick the highs just a bit, and you know what that thing sounds like. It may be a piece of shit, but you know it. So it's important to have that kind of reference. If you're mixing for the radio, for singles for the radio, that's kind of when you bring that into play. Oratones sometimes, although I'm not a big Oratone fan. But generally a boombox is a pretty cool way to go. I like Genelecs as small speakers to mix on. Everybody says, well, Yamaha's NS10s, but they're really crap. They got this huge bump in the mid-range. Once again, it depends on what you